Yeah, sure. 3 smalls? Yeah.
All right, Jacqueline, Renee, let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
We sent cameras out across the country to talk to people about, jobs, housing, retirement, all these important issues, but young people your age, to see how things are in their minds. So let's take a look at what some of them had to say. We'll start with jobs, and we'll have a watch.
I'm Samantha Louise Emery. I'm working 2 jobs right now, so one full-time and one part-time, but I need both of them to pay my bills every month, my rent and groceries, so just working all the time.
I'm Jordan Van Beert and I'm 34. I would say I'm self-employed by choice. In a way, being dependent on self-employment is always a little riskier, and in other ways it's less risky in that the risk of losing all of your work at the same time is much lower.
My name is Dia Apostolakis. I think one of our biggest issues is indeed trying to find a job. I'm in the field of communications. I had to do a double internship in order to land something in my field. I was literally doing 2 free internships, one from 9 to 5, then going from 5 to 9, and then going home at night. It's a lot harder to actually get a job.
I find that kind of sobering.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is doing exactly what they might have dreamed they would be doing at that stage in their life. I wonder, does it surprise either of you what you've heard there?
Absolutely not. Seeing those 3 storylines, that definitely isn't surprising in the stories that we've told over the years, and in just talking to my own friends, this is definitely something that we're seeing more and more of. And specifically pointing to sort of that part-time self-employed. Every time we look at the latest StatsCan employment data, this is something that we're seeing. So if we even just look at the last year alone, part-time work has underpinned Canada's job growth over the past 12 months. So of the 140,000 new positions, 124,000 of those have been part-time. So this is what we're seeing, and that the average number of hours worked per week has declined. This is just in a year, from 33.3 to 32.9 hours. So this is a very common situation, this idea that our generation, younger Canadians, are not going to have the same sort of job like my dad did for 50 years. Like, that is going to be a really rare case scenario.
Jacqueline, what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that sort of idea that precarious employment is becoming, this thing that we need to get used to. And we sort of heard that from the finance minister, the federal finance minister, late last year. And he was saying that job churn is a thing, it's going to happen more and more, and that we need to sort of get used to that. And I think it touched people kind of negatively to hear that sort of thing, because they thought that he wasn't reaching out in a way that he was going to, help them out of that position of putting together 3 part-time jobs or a part-time and full-time job to make ends meet. But the thing is that there's no easy solution to this. You did a story on automation, on robotics, sort of changing the workplace. That sort of thing is going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen. We're seeing even truck drivers, they're at risk, and we have a huge number of truck drivers in Canada. But when you see a company like Uber buy a driverless truck driving company, then that's
goodbye truck drivers.
It could happen
goodbye
really
that
quickly.
Vocation.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we want jobs that pay well is so that we can put a roof over our heads and theoretically anyway, buy a house. And we talked to some of those Canadians and others about that issue. Let's give a listen.
Pretty concerned right now. I have spent a lot of my savings in the past year just trying to get by and pay rent and find a full-time job that pays what I need right now.
Homeownership for me, at least 10 years at least.
So it's Jenny, Jenny, Hayward. The times are challenging, and I think choosing where you live, I think being flexible when you're looking in my age demographic is something to really think about, and also think about lifestyle. Whether you want to commute or not commute, that's a huge, it's a huge challenge.
My name is Chris. It's really hard just to come up with that, initial deposit, and I find that you kind of have to find another way to get the houses that you want. Most people usually get together whether it's living together with a partner, people get help from their parents just to get that deposit. I would say you kind of need something like that. It's really hard to do it on your own, you know?
You know, when I was a kid, when I was your age, when I was their age, it was daunting to think of finding the money for a down payment and then continuing to buy a house. And so in a sense, things haven't changed. What's your take? Jacqueline, let's start with you this time.
Well, I'm curious, how much was the down payment that you needed at that time?
I know,
No, but I mean, in terms of percent-wise, like now we have to have, if you don't want to pay for mortgage insurance, you need to cough up 20%. And that is a whole heck of a lot if you're trying to buy a home in a major city. So yeah, in order to get that amount of money, I think people, you have to save.
Or you have parents who are very generous, and that is an increasing a way that people are funding these homes. And we have numbers, that show that. There's interesting stats from the Bank of Montreal that says 1/3 of first-time home buyers expect parents or family to assist in their purchases. 1/3 of Canadian home buyers. Rises to 40% in the cities of Montreal and Vancouver. Now, the majority of those folks say they've had to make cutbacks in their lifestyle in order to save for that first home. And 6 in 10 say their home buying plans have actually been delayed because of rising real estate prices. But it's important to also note here, there's two very different storylines in Canada. There's the storyline for Vancouver and Toronto, and then there's the storyline almost for the rest of the country, right?
Yeah.
So we're always hearing about these horrible situations in Vancouver, but that's in Toronto. That's not the case across the country. One really interesting way to look at this is when you're looking at mortgage debt and affordability, they say, affordability should be, your mortgage shouldn't be more than 3 times your annual income. That's considered affordable. In a lot of places in the country, you can get houses for that price. Not so in Vancouver, which is 10 times. Toronto is around 8. So we're talking about two very different storylines here.
But millennials, these young Canadians, I hate to say millennials.
The M word.
Yeah, exactly. They're still buying homes. But one of the reasons why is because credit is so easy to get. Yes, they're buying perhaps more than they should be, but it's easy to get that money because mortgage rates are so low. So if you take a look at over, the past 20, 30 years, we're looking at like 1981, it peaked at more than 21%.
Shocking
for like
numbers.
A 5-year, an average 5-year fixed rate mortgage. Now, like I locked into my mortgage for 2.54. Like that is such a difference. So yes, house prices were lower in the 80s than they are now, absolutely. But interest rates were so much higher, and it stayed that way for years.
And interest rates are low now, but that's now. And
Right.
who knows where they're going to go.
Housing prices can change, interest rates can change. The future, we have no idea what's going to happen.
They could add more rules like they had been last year, so who knows?
All these things are connected, right? And so you want a job that pays you well so you can have savings and buy a house so that it will increase in value because at some point you're going to retire.
Or you hope to.
You hope to.
You hope to.
So we talk to people about that. Let's give a listen about planning for retirement.
I'm Michael Turner and I'm 23 years old. The career I'm going into is not really one where there tend to be a lot of great benefit packages and your company doesn't necessarily take care of you. So I've actually been purposely considering how I'm going to plan my retirement fund.
Retirement. My name is Jeff Tetzloff. As long as you can keep saving money, I think one day interest rates will go up and people will be able to actually just hold on to it and save it, and hopefully that'll work out for them. But
Right now, I'm pretty concerned. I was paying into RSPs before automatically off my paychecks, but I decided to stop that because I needed the extra money for my bills and everything.
I'm a little bit worried, but not too worried.
it's a concern. I'm 37 and I've got probably enough saved up to live jobless for a year, but that's pretty far away from retirement. I spend it all on vacations and snowboarding, so.
You know, let's talk about Jeff for a second.
I get Jeff.
30,
I
yeah,
get Jeff.
so do I, right?
You do, yeah.
But think about that. He's got enough money to last a year.
Right.
Right? It's so you spend it on snowboarding, right? I mean, you do what you do.
Yeah.
And you got to live at the same time. But at the same time, you got to keep your eye on the long game, right?
When we talk about sort of registered pension plans, those sort of golden retirements, we actually know that fewer and fewer Canadians are actually going to be having these when it comes to their registered pension plan. And if you just look at a chart from the 70s, 1977 to just a couple of years ago, you can see the steady decline in the amount of Canadians who have these registered retirement savings plans. So that is definitely one thing that we know younger Canadians won't be able to rely on the same way that an older generation has to. That number is going down. And a way to deal with that is the Canadian government just recently sort of beefed up the CPP to try to make up for that and provide a little bit more stability for younger Canadians when they finally reach retirement. But a lot of it has to do with just the inability to sort of save right now, and that goes back to the housing and the employment. Yeah, exactly.
But they still have big plans for their retirement, vacations, probably more snowboarding if he can manage it in his 60s or 70s. But yeah, in terms of saving, so more than half of millennials in this recent survey, they said that they'd like to retire by the time they turn 60, but only a quarter of them think that that is actually a realistic possibility. Most of them expect to work well into their 60s, even their 70s. And there is data to show that 1 out of 8 people who are older than 65 still work. And that's up
but
from
we're all living longer too.
Well,
right?
it's
I mean,
true.
You can
it's
work.
True.
It's a different world now
Yeah.
on that aspect than it was a couple of generations ago.
Well, yeah, we're in a tough position, but I think you have to be aware of where you want to be when you're 65 and how you're going to get yourself there.
And use those part-time jobs and the unpaid internships and hope to buy a place.
And hope that place goes up in value.
I don't know whether to be, depressed or optimistic about.
Every generation, when we speak to some of the, older people, every generation had its own struggles. This is the struggle for our generation, and I like to be optimistic about it. I think a lot of the people I see and the friends you talk to, we are still optimistic. We understand there are struggles and it's a different time and it's a different ball game, but that doesn't mean we can't find ways to work around it. So yes, it could be a little bit daunting when you look at the numbers and the facts, but I think there is an energy, an entrepreneurial spirit from the younger generation, and we'll make this work.
Thanks for talking. Thanks. This has been enjoyable.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. No worries.